Welcome to my car, the only quiet place that I have near or around my house. And I come to this quiet place today because I want to share something more about your fertility with you today, something that is not talked about a whole lot. Most doctors don't even know a whole lot about it because it's not really taught in med school, but it's something that is vital to your fertility. And what I am talking about is called cervical mucus. Now, part of my job requires me to say the word mucus all the time. So I'm pretty desensitized to the word, but if you're kind of like, it's more commonly known as discharge, right? Most women see it or have seen it sometime in their life. And it is very normal. It's very good for women to be producing cervical mucus. So we're going to talk all about that today, why it's actually a sign of healthy fertility, why you need it to be fertile. Absolutely need it to be fertile. We're going to talk about why. And we're just going to really just cover the bases of just this whole idea, new idea of cervical mucus. My name is Haley, and this is Truth in Fertility. So today, like I said, we're talking about cervical mucus. This is something that I have learned a whole lot about, and I teach about all the time because this is vital to learning how to chart your cycle and just understanding your hormones in your body. The cervical mucus, that discharge that your body creates, is a direct response to hormones in your body. And so let's talk about the hormones really quick, because I think that can give us a really good idea of why your body creates the cervical mucus. Sometimes it looks different, when it will look different, and when it is naturally supposed to everything be dry, right? Because there is a time in your cycle where you shouldn't have any cervical mucus. So let's start from the very beginning. So the very beginning of a woman's cycle is day 1 of her period. She has, 4 to 7 days of bleeding. And then after her menses is when estrogen will start to rise. So when estrogen rises, estrogen talks to the cervix. So your cervix, a woman's cervix, is right below the uterus. So just to kind of give you an example, you have your uterus here, which is about the shape of your fist, and then you have the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, and then right below your uterus is your cervix, and then below that is the vaginal canal. So your cervix is where the cervical mucus is produced. That's why it's called cervical mucus, because it comes from your cervix, right? Your cervix is actually a canal, and so there's an actual hole in it. And inside that hole, there are little crypts that are formed inside the cervix. And so this is where that cervical mucus is produced, is within these cervical crypts that are within the cervix. And so as estrogen starts to rise, your cervix starts to produce cervical mucus. And so estrogen usually starts out pretty low, and it has a slow rise as you make your way towards the time of ovulation. And so when estrogen is pretty low still, but it is starting to rise, you might start to see some cervical mucus that is maybe kind of sticky looking. It's white or yellow. It's not really slippery or anything like that. It's not very stretchy, but there's something there that you notice. And that's perfectly normal. That is your cervix kind of kicking in, recognizing there's estrogen through your body and responding to that estrogen. So you have this estrogen that's rising, and as it continues to rise, your cervical mucus, you produce more cervical mucus, and this mucus starts to change. And so it changes into something that actually kind of looks like egg whites. There are methods of like natural family planning and charting that literally call this egg white mucus because it looks just like egg whites. So when estrogen is really high in your body, which is around the time of ovulation, usually right before, you will start to see really slippery, really stretchy, mostly clear cervical mucus. And this is a sign that your body is ready to ovulate. And ovulation is when an egg is released from your ovary. So this really stretchy, really clear, really slippery cervical mucus is produced right around the time of ovulation. And this is totally normal, totally natural. There are women that I've heard of that are like, I thought that was an infection. I thought there was something wrong. No, not at all. This is your body responding to estrogen. This is what it does. And we'll talk a little bit more too about why it's really forming a lot around that time. But let's keep going through the cycle and then we'll get there. So estrogen peaks usually the day before ovulation. So again, your cervical mucus is going to be very stretchy, very clear, very runny. Right after ovulation occurs, so the egg is released from the ovary, there's another hormone that starts to kick in, and that's progesterone. So pre-ovulation, you have estrogen that's playing its role. It is dominant. It is getting higher and higher. It's producing that cervical mucus and making it flow. After ovulation, estrogen will drop very significantly, and progesterone starts to rise. Estrogen does have a little bit of a rise again in that post-ovulation phase, but progesterone is dominant. It is very high in this post-ovulation phase. And progesterone dries everything up. So in that pre-ovulation phase, when estrogen is high, you have a whole lot of mucus. After ovulation, your mucus should dry up. Everything should dry up. And it normally happens like that. It's like a day where one day you'll see a whole lot of mucus and then the next day you see nothing. And that is, again, this is totally natural and normal. This is what your body is supposed to be doing with a normal, healthy fertility cycle. So your mucus dries up for the remainder of that cycle until your next period. The whole thing starts over again. So let's talk a little bit more though about estrogen high cervical mucus. So right around the time of ovulation, this is when a woman's body is preparing to get pregnant. Because when an egg is released, her body is saying, okay, there's an egg there. It could be fertilized and this would create new life, right? If the egg does become fertilized by a sperm cell. So something about sperm is that they love cervical mucus. Sperm loves cervical mucus. Bet you never heard that phrase before. So sperm loves cervical mucus. Cervical mucus, for a few reasons. So cervical mucus has sugars in it that actually keep sperm alive. Good cervical mucus, so that estrogen high cervical mucus that's slippery, that's stretchy, and that's clear, it can keep sperm alive for up to 5 days. So here's what that means. A woman could have intercourse on, let's say, a Monday, but she doesn't ovulate until Thursday. The sperm from the intercourse on Monday could live inside her body from Monday to Thursday and actually hit the egg. Let's say she ovulates on Thursday. That sperm from Monday can hit the egg that is released on Thursday. And so conception doesn't always occur right when intercourse happens. Sometimes it can actually occur a few days later because sperm love cervical mucus. They can stay in and be alive in cervical mucus for up to 5 days. Without cervical mucus, if a woman has intercourse with no cervical mucus where she's fully dry, usually in that post-ovulation phase, sperm only live for up to 2 hours. There's never been known for sperm to live longer than 2 hours without the aid of cervical mucus. So it's a lot more unlikely for a woman who doesn't have any cervical mucus for her to get pregnant. And so, because that sperm just can't live in her body long enough to reach the egg. Also, what that cervical mucus does is if you look at it microscopically, that cervical mucus that's really high in estrogen actually has microscopic channels within it. And these channels actually allow the sperm to swim through. So not only does that cervical mucus have sugars that keep the sperm alive, but it also helps in sperm transport because of these channels. You can kind of think of like an Olympic swimming pool where you have just like rows and rows and rows for people to swim. It's like that. Microscopically, there's these channels that allow the sperm to travel through, and it actually aids in sperm transport to get to the egg if the egg is viable in there. Now, the third thing that's really cool about cervical mucus, and it's just like, gives you just awe of our design as women and like what our bodies can do. Cervical mucus also filters out abnormal sperm. So what does that mean? Sometimes so a normal sperm cell should have one head and a long straight tail. Now, some sperm have two heads. That's abnormal. Some sperm have too big of a head. That's abnormal. And so these channels will actually filter out that bad sperm. The sperm that have two heads or the sperm that have too big of a head are not going to be able to fit through those microscopic channels. So usually only the healthy sperm can travel through those channels of the mucus. And that's just amazing, like what our bodies are capable of doing. It's phenomenal. So not too many people geek out about cervical mucus, but if you're geeking out with me, let's geek out together. This is great. So cervical mucus is something that is so vital to your health as a woman, to fertility, to making babies. We all learn, right, that to make a baby, you need an egg and a sperm. And that is very true. But what we don't learn very commonly is that you also need cervical mucus because of how vital it is to keep sperm alive. So oftentimes if a woman is struggling with infertility or not being able to get pregnant for whatever reason, sometimes it could be because she's having some sort of hormonal imbalance that's causing her to not produce this cervical mucus. And so that's why charting your cycle can be so helpful in knowing what your body is doing, what your hormones are doing, how estrogen and progesterone are playing a role in your body. Because if you are completely dry where you are not producing any mucus at all throughout your cycle, that means there's something going on. There's something wrong. And that's your body telling you, okay, there's something wrong here. There's a hormonal imbalance. There's something going on that needs to be fixed. And it can be fixed. It's something that can be fixed. So super, super important, cervical mucus, right? Also, charting your cycle can show if a woman is producing too much cervical mucus. So like I said, oftentimes, or for the most times after ovulation, a woman should not be producing any more cervical mucus throughout the rest of her cycle, because that's when progesterone is high, it dries everything up. And so if she's not producing any she shouldn't be producing any cervical mucus during that like post-ovulation, that second half of the cycle. If she is, that can also point to something going on. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but sometimes women who have continuous cervical mucus, sometimes it can point to an infection. Sometimes it can actually point to things like PCOS. That PCOS patients very oftentimes have just continuous mucus all the time. And so these are things that, again, with charting, you can know about your body. And so you can be so much more just empowered, take charge of your fertility and really knowing what's going on and working with a doctor to be able to fix the underlying root of those things. Also, too, just by looking at cervical mucus, you can see different things even based on what the mucus looks like. So not only is she producing any or like too much, or is she producing not enough, but sometimes, like for example, if the mucus looks too gummy, where it has kind of the consistency, if you think about like when you get a gift card and there's like a little strip that you can peel off, it's like a clear strip that peels off and that's supposed to be sticky. Sometimes cervical mucus can kind of have that gummy consistency to it. And that can often be a sign of cervical inflammation. So there's just like, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but there are so many things that your cervical mucus can point to with something going on, something being wrong. This is your body's way of telling you, okay, it's either healthy or it's not. And we can actually look at that by charting, and we'll be able to see what's going on. So in my last video, I talked a little bit about NAPRO technology. If you haven't watched that, please feel free to watch that. I talk a little bit more about that. But NAPRO technology is short for natural procreative technology. It's a women's health science, and there are certain doctors that you have to be a doctor who's trained in naprotechnology, but really it's looking at the root of the problem. So instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on the problem, or instead of giving the woman a pill, or, doing those types of things, we're actually able to look at the root of why you're not producing enough cervical mucus, or why you're producing too much, or what is going on here, right? They're actually able to get to the root and help that. So if anything I said today, you're like, oh, that's me, oh, that's me, oh, that's me, do not fear, do not worry. I will put a link to the naprotechnology doctors below. There is a way that you can just put in your location and you can find a naprotechnology doctor near you. You'll probably start charting your cycle so that they're able to kind of see what's going on. And there, again, are so many things that your cycle, just by charting it every day and charting that cervical mucus and charting what your period looks like and all of that, it can point to so many things. And so, it's just amazing. It is just amazing how beautiful the woman's body is, and that, like, these things that her body creates are just, I could go on and on. Clearly I'm passionate about this, and I hope that you are too, or at least you're learning something here. But yeah, just to end this, cervical mucus is so important. It is vital to your fertility. It's vital to making babies. It is, and even if you're not in a state of life where you're wanting to have children right now, or you're not married, you're not sexually active, you're like, that's not what my intention is. It's still something that shows your body that you're healthy, right? So no matter what state in life you're in, you should still want a healthy reproductive system, right? We don't ever say anything about the rest of our body of like, oh, I'm okay with that, like, not working out right now. Or, oh, I'm okay with just putting a Band-Aid on that right now. Like, no, we don't say that about any other part of our body. So why do we say that about our reproductive system? So let's get these things in check. Let's look at them right now. Let's learn more about our reproductive system, about our bodies, about our fertility, what is healthy, so that we can be the healthiest women and the healthiest people that we are created and made to be. If you stuck around with me through the end of this video, I just want to thank you so much for just being with me. And these videos are just giving me a whole lot of life. So I really hope that they give you life too. If you have any questions, or if I left anything out that you're like, oh, I want you to cover this, this, and this, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. And yes, so I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless you.